Hi, welcome to the Lifestyle Herbalists, the podcast where holistic wellness meets everyday living. I'm your host, Dabney Vaccaro. I'm a registered dental hygienist, a clinical herbalist, and a certified health coach.
And I'm your co-host, Sabrina Cooper, a registered dental hygienist with a bachelor's in oral health promotion, a certified culinary nutritionist and herbalist, and a mindfulness and mindful eating coach. Together, we explore the intersection of holistic health, herbal wisdom, and joyful living. From plant-powered remedies to kitchen medicine, mindful moments, and conversations that feed the soul, we're here to help you feel vibrant, grounded, and inspired in your daily life. So steep a cup of something soothing, settle in, and let's grow well together one episode at a time, bringing you a healthy dose of happiness.
Welcome back to the Lifestyle Herbalist podcast.
Did you push record?
Are you recording? I think so. Welcome back to the Lifestyle Herbalist podcast. Today we're joined by Scotti, founder of Slow Living Solutions and Applied Organizational Psychologist, who is passionate about helping fire and EMS professionals build healthier, more sustainable lives and careers. Growing up in a firefighting family and later experiencing the loss of her father to cancer, Scotti developed a deep understanding of the personal cost and chronic stress and burnout one can have on individuals and families. Through Slow Living Solutions, she works with firefighters, EMS professionals, and departments to strengthen resilience, reduce burnout, and foster cultures of connection and support. Her work focuses on practical tools of self-regulation, relationship building, and creating a legacy that allows people to serve others without sacrificing their own health and well-being. We're excited to explore her journey, the importance of intentional living, and how all of us, whether we're first responders or not, can learn how to slow down, reconnect, and live with greater purpose. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you here. You have quite the story, and I read your bio, and I'm really happy to have you here and hear what you have to share about what you offer the EMS and firefighters and all these in your community. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate both you, Dabney, and Sabrina for having me today.
Awesome. Well, it seems like your father's career in the fire service shaped you deeply. What lessons did you learn growing up in that environment, and how do they influence your work that you do today?
Yeah, I like to start with a childhood story. One of my earliest memories was being home with the chicken pox, and I was probably about 6 or 7. And my dad and I decided that we would play checkers. And without fail, I lost multiple times over, I'm sure. And I remember asking him the question, when will you ever let me win? And his response was never, never going to just let you win. You have to earn the win. You have to strategize for the win. You have to uh, be able to beat the master. The mentee learns from the mentor until one can succeed the other. And I've really taken that to heart in thinking about how do I want to, in my own way, with my own talents, carry on my father's legacy past his life. What can I contribute to the community that he cared about in the ways that he cared about that community, and still be true to who I am, and to do it with intention, which really I think is in many respects synonymous with strategy itself.
Wow, that was a very good lesson. Thinking about my own life with playing checkers, and I used to beat my grandfather, and he would try to distract me and cheat. But yeah, those lessons early on, they make a difference, don't they?
He believed a lot. I remember him saying at some point, if you're going to lose, you lose with dignity. You lose with integrity. And we don't always win. Particularly, I remember talking to him about it when he got sick. He had pancreatic cancer, and I drove very furiously across the US to get home to take care of him. And my wish for myself was to get my rematch, which I did. And one of the things that I thought was really important is that sometimes we lose at life. Sometimes that's part of the inherent lesson. And so um, when we think about it that way, how do we move through death and through grief with dignity and with integrity and with honor? Um, and so that's what my work is really influenced by and deeply rooted in.
I think it's really important. I mean, I know that both Dabney and I have had our share of grief, and it does shape you in many ways. And you're right, it is how you manage and get through these times and what it can offer you on the other side. And so you described grief as in one of the things that you sent us, the human cost of time misused. So can you explain that concept and how losing your father changed the trajectory of your life
Sure.
in that sense?
The the most common sentiment that is heard at the end of life is not that people regret what they did, but that they regret what they didn't do. That their time was spent fixated on professional accolades, social status, financial assets, and disregarded their health at the expense of their longevity, their personal development, time with family, especially their kids, and investing in relationships. And at the end of the day, none of us knows how long we have. There's no checking your savings balance on time. That's why Slow Living Solutions tagline is you can never save time, but you
Mhm.
can always choose how you spend it. How we spend our time is how we live our lives and how we live it with, if we're intentional with our time, we are intentional with our life and vice versa. And that's the core of what the slow living philosophy is all about.
I love that tagline. It is so
Mhm.
profound.
When I think about you'd ask sort of a secondary question of how losing my father sort of changed that trajectory for me. I think my experience of grief and watching him process um, the lived experience of death, really, made me start to question like what do I want the end of my life to look like? What does fulfillment look like for me? Can I not to be too morbid, but hypothetically, get hit by a bus tomorrow and be okay with what I did and how I lived and the relationships that I made and the things that I invested in, because I have no guarantees. So whether it's something that immediate and traumatic like like my hypothetical, or I, like many people, befall to cancer at some point in time, and that something is imminently ahead of you. I think taking the time while we're not in a state of urgency or a heightened sense of the end, um, it brings a different perspective to how it brought me different perspective in how I really wanted to think about like where's the value that I was delivering. Many people probably on your podcast don't know what an applied organizational psychologist is. That's a whole lot of words. So if I were to summarize that really quickly, I specialize in team dynamics and how people work together and establish relationships within organizational cultures for a living. And then how do we take research and apply that to help teams to work more effectively with one another? Things that are, for me at least, established in building morale versus building efficiency. And so many of the things that I cared about professionally when it comes to team dynamics and what I believe creates a good and healthy working environment did not necessarily fall in line with the motivations or prerogatives of the organizations that I was working for, who treated their human resources more as a machine with lots of cogs,
Mm.
uh, looking for the greatest, most efficient way, most effective way to have low overhead and high profit. And that oftentimes came at the expense of individuals. So it was important for me as my father, after my father passed, and really having to take a look at what I was doing with my life and why I was so miserable. I had all of the, I checked all of the boxes from a social perspective, the money, the house, the this, the that, whatever. And yet I was still deeply unfulfilled. And so my responsibility to myself became, if I know what I care about and I know what my values are and I know the things that I want to deliver to this world in a meaningful way, and I'm not able to do that in this context, how do I re-engineer my life and my career to be built around delivering what I care about rather than trying to fit into a box that I clearly don't belong in? And I think that's, if I were to give, not that anyone's asking for it, but if I were to give advice to anyone who is feeling stuck in their career, not everybody can go start their own company, but I think there's something to be said for getting very specific about what it is that you see as the value you bring to the table, and how can you capitalize that in the relationships that you establish both personally and professionally, rather than feeling like you just have to bear, grin, and comply in whatever the machine is that you happen to be working in.
I think too, like with, your father was a firefighter, correct? So did he carried obviously a lot of emotional baggage and of not just things like of things had seen and had dealt with, and the emotional baggage probably wore on the family as well. Maybe he kept it in, internalized it. I don't know, maybe I don't know how he processed it. Did he have the do they and then I guess, I mean, the segue is that your career also, then you from your dad's probably life and where how it ended early and what he had dealt with probably made you feel like, wow, like I'm this roller coaster in a different way. Like I'm giving myself of myself in different ways than my dad did. But was there that not that support to get you through all that emotional stuff that you were carrying, and you were living, but you weren't living life, right? You weren't enjoying the life sort of that you were like had all the things, but you didn't get to really experience it, I suppose, in that sense. So that kind of got you to how you where you are today and how you're trying to help people manage and be supported, well supported, and enjoy life while doing things maybe they enjoy but not fully or whatever, right? Is that kind
Yeah,
of
let me see if I can summarize that.
yeah.
Both of my parents have were civil servants. My mom was a school psychologist. My father was a lieutenant for the fire department. So both were public workers, and served underserved communities. And both uh, were very dedicated to their professions, from a very passion oriented perspective, very identity driven in their perspective. Uh, and I grew up and went to school and thought I was going to become an artist. And I did. I did. That was sort of my first lifetime. Um, iteration number one. I was a professional artist. I had a gallery studio. I was part of a residency. I was showing across the country, and I had some wonderful mentors in my time, and really came to a crossroads in my work where I found that I'd been making a lot of work as a reflection of where I was in my early 20s, a phase often for many people to be riddled with vanity, as is just the nature of the age bracket and part of the development process that we all go through, and reached a point where I wanted the work to be about something greater than myself. And I had a mentor that I was talking to about a piece of work that I wanted to do based on a book that I had been reading. And the book, what, if I can remember what the title was for you, The Shock Doctrine. Um, the book is called The Shock Doctrine. And I'm not going to remember the name of the author offhand right now, but you could certainly look it up if you wanted to add it to the show notes. And in that book, they're talking about the tsunami. I think the major tsunami that happened in 2004, 2005, that wiped out a huge portion of the Sri Lankan coastline, and how in doing so, the Sri Lankan government decided that they were going to sell off that land and privatize it. And it displaced a bunch of people who had been for generations fishermen on that coastline. And not just, it wasn't just a loss of profession for them, it was a loss of community, it was a loss of family. Literally, people died. It was, a loss of identity, and in many ways, I might be intuiting a little bit here, projecting, but a loss of a sense of greater Sri Lankan culture, because major commercialization is not going to conform to the traditions of a particular country. We have a lot of private companies that are coming in that are global. It's going to bring something different. So there's all these layers of grief, and in talking with her about it and how moved I was by it, she had said to me, like, you can't make work about things you don't know about. So, which I think is one of the most brilliant things. It was a nice slap in the face, right? Is like, I hadn't lived that life. You can't make work about somebody that you aren't. You can't make work about an experience you didn't have. Like, what connects us in, even in this conversation, is being able to share in our memories and our human experience, and that's what enriches conversation. And we lack that when we're talking about things that aren't related to us. So she was like, if you're gonna make work that's related to, or that wants to talk about these topics, you need to go experience those things. You can travel there, you can talk to people, you can create a way in which to go make work about this if that's important to you. And I ended up deciding that was not the route that I wanted to go, but I found myself having to make decisions around, was being a studio artist really all that fulfilling, if what I felt in being a studio artist was that I was isolated from having these larger experiences. I was not yet mature enough in my thinking, or brave enough in my emotions to have acted at that time on finding a way to, as I was saying earlier, re-engineer my life to afford me those types of experiences. But I think it kind of all came back around, because being an artist is what has helped me to learn how to critically think, and critically assess experiences that I'm having, and have a different perspective than other people, and continuously be challenging a status quo, in my own way. Just so when people talk about, like, well, but you don't make art anymore, I'm like, well, I do. I've made a business, which is a form of art. And I bring a product and a service to a demographic that I do know something about. And so there's a way of, life coming back around like that, where we're able to, like, make those correlations. between like the earlier phases of things that were going on that we wanted to dive into, and then recognizing like, oh, throughout, going out into the world and doing other things outside of art really led me back around to being able to live that experience just in a different context where I'm able to bring a much richer version of myself to the table. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, Scotty, and I love the reflection. Like you've really reflected on your earlier life, with your parents, your life as an artist. And through the death of your father, you further reflected, and now you're doing this amazing work to help others experience a better life. So tell me, what does slow living mean to someone whose profession requires, these rapid responses and constantly being ready to go? Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, slow living is all about intentionality. Intentionality is even more necessary in high risk, high stakes situations because being complicit, compliant, or complacent costs lives. First response professions require individuals to be fully engaged in the present moment and able to pivot or troubleshoot on a dime without looking to an authority to make decisions or take responsibility for them. I always like to paint the parallelism for people of when you think about like a first response team, it's similar to playing on a sports team. The team can't win if they need the coach to tell each player exactly what to do. Synergy among teams is having a shared vision and bringing intention to how you play your position so that the team as a whole wins. So each emergency service team member has a role to play, and they have to be intentional in how they execute as well as in how they communicate both amongst themselves and with the public.
Mhm.
And I can definitely see how your organizational uh, work has really played into a part of your new business.
Yes.
Yeah.
So same with the firefighters and EMS professionals. They're like, I sort of touched upon it before, but they're viewed as strong individuals, and they're, they have to be, like you said, on all the time in their role. So why do you think stress, illness, and even suicide can become hidden consequences of that strength?
Yeah, so as you pointed out, the job is carries a lot of trauma, it carries a lot of stress. It's a very physically demanding job and it exposes you to high rates of carcinogenic exposure. Uh, but to continue with the sports parallel, there was a study published by the American Orthopedic Society in 2024 on the impact of mental health on elite athletes. And the study showed that mental stress is not separate from physiological stress. So if we're struggling with processing emotions and we're ruminating and we're having a hard time self-regulating, uh, that has physiological responses within the body that we don't necessarily pick up on in a very conscious way. And so it puts a lot of stress on our organs, on our muscles, on our ligaments and tissues that then start to break down the physical body. And we see with athletes that despite the best training and resources that they may have, can end up with massive physical injuries. So case in point being, I think everyone's fairly familiar with this, is like Kobe Bryant ruptured his Achilles tendon in 2013. Now, what I think Kobe Bryant's also a great example of is what this study showed as a result is that the greatest determinant of who was going to be susceptible to injury was how they regulated and managed their stress. And the study also showed that the greatest determinant for recovery was how people historically handled resiliency. And the strength of their social network. So that's not different in many respects from the way to think about first response, and fire and EMS specifically. Those who feel more isolated, who are not good at processing emotions, who are more likely to, or have been trained to compartmentalize versus to process what they've gone through, are at higher risk for chronic illness, whether that's physical illness or mental illness. And oftentimes there's a correlation between how well you're able to process emotions and how well you have a strong social network. So yes, they are inherently, I think you don't just like accidentally go into the fire service as a profession and stay there. It's very taxing in that regard. But I think those who weather that storm the best, and why there are such high rates of, well, let me say that a different way. Those who weather the storm the best are the ones with the highest, with the greatest social networks to provide them with a life and with purpose outside of just the job. And those who suffer, and we see that it's many of them, with increased rates of mental illness, suicide, cancer, etc., no matter how good the PPE gets, or how many different methods we have and processes we have to try and create more safety in the field. The fact that these rates are going up is indicative of the fact that we really need to deal with building not just the social, emotional, self-regulation components, but how do we help firefighters and EMS to build stronger networks of community amongst themselves as well as within their own personal lives.
I think you're right when you say about those that can weather the storm and those that, weather it, but even with all the support, they can't, find the way out of the storm, let's say.
Yeah.
I had lost my brother-in-law a few years ago to suicide. And he was that guy that you thought had it all. He had the community, he had the support. He was like, I'm doing my work, I'm not like this, or and COVID came and everything kind of shut down, didn't have that support. But at the same time, I feel that there was that he just thought he had it together. You have it, you can take it. But I think deep down inside, you're not processing it as well as you could think you are. And I think that it really does affect the nervous system and all that kind of thing. And, as much as people think they are supported, sometimes they don't even want to take the resources because of pride. They think they've got it all under control. If I'm not mistaken, there's ones that can weather the storm. They think, oh, I'm fine. I'm strong. I can take it. I can do it. But at some point there's a breaking point, just like a dam. It builds until it just ruptures and the floodgates are open, and then that kind of goes. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people need to understand that there is a lot to these high intense jobs, and not just in fire service or EMS. In our everyday lives and everyday jobs, there can be that same storm to weather.
Yes. And I don't want to downplay the piece around the necessity for resilience and how do we build resilience.
Thank you for joining us today on the podcast. I wanted to pause and give a shout out to our sponsors. First, Great Ghee has become a favorite in my kitchen. I love having high quality, nourishing cooking fat made with simple ingredients, and right here in Virginia. If you would like to try this yourself, use the link in the show notes and you'll receive 10% off your order with the code Dabney Vaccaro. We're also very grateful for Defender Shield. As we talk often about reducing our overall toxic burden, Defender Shield offers products designed to support healthier technology habits. Use the link in our show notes and receive 5% off your order. And finally, if you've been thinking about growing your own food, Survival Garden Seeds makes it easy to get started. Whether you have a large garden or a few containers on your porch, they're offering our listeners 10% off through the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the show.
Resiliency is our ability to not just overcome something, but our belief in our ability to overcome. It's our sense of personal agency, our sense of self-efficacy, and our belief that we can change our circumstances. And we're not very good on a societal level at helping people to strengthen those skills. So a lot of the work that I do when it comes to self-regulation is to start with the basics of being able to even put language to the feelings that you are having. Because when we don't have, like, language is a I always call language the weapon of love or destruction, but it's also it's the key, it's the gateway for us to be able to communicate with others and with ourselves about what it is that we're experiencing. And we can't necessarily process something that we can't put language to. And so being able to uh, recognize the feelings that we're having and feel them, like just physiologically, physically feel them, is one thing. Being able to label them is another. Being able to communicate them is the next step after that. And as we're able to strengthen those skills, we then can move into um, building back self-trust and our ability to see ourselves as someone who feels things and in a normal way, and can relate to others, and that we're not alone in that. Um, that we see that when we share our experiences, that other people relate to that, uh, and that helps us in being able to reconnect. I think of it as reconnecting with our own humanity when we've been led to deny our own feelings and emotions, is really, I think, a denial of being human.
Right. Wow. You've mentioned in your bio like moral injury and identity drift, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure our listeners would know what that means, but can you explain how they show up in people's lives?
Sure. So I work, like, first and foremost, I kind of couch my work as being about burnout recovery and mitigation. And there's five major components that come with burnout. The first one is the one we've spent the most time talking about, which is really like, what is our experience of being able to regulate stress? So weathering the highs and lows. And when we're constantly in chronic stress, it wears us down. The second is moral injury. And moral injury is about expectation violation. I thought my job was going to look like this. I thought my success was going to look like this. And my reality does not match what my fantasy was. My reality doesn't match what I believe to be um, morally or ethically right. So, using myself as the example, when I was talking about working in a corporate environment, I was working for companies that had a different set of values than I did. And those things were at odds with one another. And that wears a person down to feel like I am contributing to something that I don't fundamentally believe in, or I can't live my best self in this environment and bring my best self to the table and make an impact because that is not welcomed in this environment. That is what moral injury ultimately is. When things, when we, for firefighters, it can often look like I've experienced something that I feel like is unfair or unjust. I couldn't save someone in their, their cardiac arrest. Um, that they don't necessarily maybe they're having, maybe they're they have a different set of values than are projected by the department that they work for. All of these things can lead us to be in conflict with our environments, and so being able to assess what our moral ground is and what our moral environment is helps us to understand where that dissonance exists. And then once we understand that, we can make efforts to move forward. But not knowing what it is or why we're always like bitter, resentful, or frustrated, or why we feel like we keep doing the same thing over and over again and getting the same results is where we can get stuck in that moral injury. Identity drift is number 3. Identity drift is really about when your identity becomes very tied to, in this instance, to your profession. So I had mentioned earlier, both my parents being in civil service, who they see themselves as is very closely tied to the work that they do. American culture like pushes this very heavily and has for decades, that your job is really like a representation of who you are. It's a way for us to categorize and understand people, or be able to sort of put them into a bucket and make some assumptions about them. And so when the job takes over your identity, we start having questions about who are we actually, because we really aren't inherently the job. If we're not happy in our role anymore, where does that leave us? Or for Fire and EMS, they have careers that end at a much earlier age and then typically go on to have a secondary career long before their full-fledged retirement. And there's often a lot of struggle with, who am I when I am no longer a part of the service? I've been doing this same type of work for 30 years. Now what? And I think that that's not just true of the fire service. That can also be very true for anybody who's moving into the next phase of their life and into retiring. I think often retirement is romanticized as like living on vacation for the next however many years. And often our sense of purpose ends up lost when our identity is so closely tied to the value that we've delivered through our profession. And people struggle with how to reconcile with that.
I couldn't agree more. I talk to people, in the dental practice who are on the verge of retirement. And so the question I usually ask, so what's next? Because in my experience, those who say nothing don't seem to live much longer. They seem to
Yeah.
fade pretty quickly. And the people who are thriving they're robust and they are volunteering. They've taken on more responsibilities because I like you said, I think it comes down to purpose. Like each of us need a purpose in our life.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I don't like that word retirement. I like the word what's next, or transition, or this is my next phase. This is the next chapter.
Yes.
I don't ever plan to retire.
Yes. Well, and
Do
so if I may piggyback off of that real quickly, the fourth component of burnout is about belonging. And when we have community outside of our profession, we're able to make that transition much better. And we have a stronger sense of identity, because belonging is about our individual, authentic selves being part of a greater collective. And so it's very important as working professionals that we feel a sense of belonging in our professional environments, so that we don't have that dissonance. But then also in our lives as a whole, do we have support systems that see us for who we are and not just what we do? Um, and then the final one, just to close it out and make sure I've hit all 5, uh, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but it's the analysis paralysis. So when we look at the combination of all of those things, I'm feeling dysregulated, I'm up, I'm down, I'm all over the place, I'm stressed out for any number of reasons. My expectations aren't being met in the job that I have. My identity is tied to it, though. How do I figure out who I am? Since I'm clearly not living the fantasy that I thought this was going to be, and so I don't feel this sense of belonging. How do I reconcile all of these things? And people can often get stuck and be like, well, I guess this is just the life that I've chosen and it's what I'm going to do. And there's a level of apathy that sets in with burnout where people feel, as we were talking about earlier, like they don't have agency or they don't have self-efficacy, that they aren't capable or don't have what it takes to make a change to better their lives.
I love that.
Yeah, I think it's really important what you touched upon about like activity too. Dabney, you also said that is having some sort of volunteer or some sort of something outside of work to kind of remove yourself from your everyday working environment, whatever it may be, and something else that can bring you joy and or learning something new that you've always wanted to do. You know, maybe it's gardening or cooking class or just something to kind of shift the brain and the nervous system in order to do something and dysregulate, right? So that you can have something other to focus on. Because I can't even imagine, you know, I always think of like on the topic of EMS and fire service and all these, you know, paramedics, this like I mean, the heaviness that comes with that and it can internalize with loss if you've seen loss or anything or someone who's lost someone and if you're empathetic to that and some people can kind of close it off but I'm sure it's internalized still in embedded in them but some people you know take it on and they all they can think is over and over that whole thing like same with military like that's why I can see like they have a lot of people who need the extra help and so um I think this topic is really this conversation is really going to get hit home with a lot of people. And so I know that one of your unique focuses is generativity, which is leaving things better than we found them. So why is this legacy so important for long-term wellness and preventing burnout?
Yeah. So when we think about the origins of human civilizations, we've always been a very tribal species. And if we think about it from a tribalistic perspective, everyone has a role to play. So you contribute to the greater whole, and in return, you receive the benefits and the protection and the safety of the whole for yourself. And so part of being part of being in even today's civilizations, which are let's just say are more complex in their nature, but we still live in neighborhoods, we still live in cities, we still have groups and social circles and people that we interact with that are meant to take care of us. And so as a way to look at the opposition of isolation would be this sense of community that like if you didn't live in human civilization, you would be off on your own somewhere, having to do everything for yourself. And we derive a lot of meaning and personal value from what it is that we contribute to the group. So it sort of runs very counterintuitive to a lot of the ways that American ideology holds up, you know, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and individualism on this pedestal, and disregards the fact that it's always taken a village to get anywhere that you're trying to go, that none of us does it by ourselves. And so generativity, which is all about legacy, is really the ability for an individual to acquire resources that they have from their larger community, their tribe, as well as from their own talents, and be able to pass those on to the next generation. So it's a gift, is how I see it, that I have been blessed to outlive my father, that many of us would say that's how things are supposed to go, that the next generation succeeds the generation prior. And so so generativity is really like, what do we have to impart to other people? What's the meaning and the impact that we've made for other people? And what is it that we leave that they remember when we are gone? When we can see the impact that we have in our lived experience and we aren't just leaving that up to chance when we're not here, I think that is the best way to start counteracting the effects of burnout. Those of us who are grounded in the difference that we make in other people's lives are far less likely to take ourselves out of the living, uh, because we are fueled by that, and we see the positive that happens for other people, and we know that we then derive something from them. So before I beat the dead horse, I hopefully that answers the question of like what really is legacy, because I think generativity is really synonymous with legacy, and legacy sounds very, in many respects, like a little highfalutin and something that's, I don't know, outside of our control, or is very lofty and as a goal, instead of really thinking about like, well, what are the things that when I talk about values with my clients, we always start with like, what are the things that who are the people that you remember the most, that have had the biggest influence on your life, and then how have they influenced you? And we can back into what our values are based on the patterns that we see in that. That's all generativity right there, is looking at how other people help to shape who we are and who we want to be for others.
Yeah, something you mentioned, Scotty, was, the burnout and helping people, be a better version of themselves, and what is your purpose? And I was thinking about dental hygiene and dental hygienists. There is a very high burnout rate among hygienists, but I think it may even come down to what is it you're doing, or how do you feel like you're helping your patients day to day? And for me, like when I go into the practice, and I'm only there part-time, so that might be part of it, but I really try to impact my patients in a positive way to help them with their oral health, their overall health, and to help them in their lives to become a better version of themselves. And I wonder how many people just go through the rabbit or the hamster wheel of life, not really getting off to think about what is my purpose? What should I be doing? How can I make an impact for those around us? So
Yeah,
yeah, I love the work that you're doing. And so tell me more about like how people can get in touch with you. Like, how does your business work? Are you virtual? Do you go in person? Like, if someone is listening, our listeners who are thinking, I have a brother-in-law or I have a dad who could really benefit from this, like how would they can contact you? How does that work?
sure. So you can go to slowlivingsolutions.com is the fastest way to get a hold of me. Uh, on there, you have several options. So I always encourage people to take the burnout scorecard. When you take that, it's like taking a little survey, and it will give you a response that then shows you, of the 5 components of burnout, like where are you indexing higher than others. So it sort of gives you a like plot on the map for like, okay, here's where I am in the greater perspective of things. It's one more data point to factor in, and another way, another view to look at yourself and what you're experiencing. If you enjoy that, there's also a free training and some audio downloads that you can also receive that help in taking some first steps to learning about burnout and what you can do initially, um, to start to move through and on your journey. I always think of, and I want to make sure I highlight this, is, burnout. If we're thinking about the different components of burnout, it's not a matter of it's not a matter of getting rid of it entirely. We're not trying to never have negative experiences or never feel stressed in any way. That's an inherent part of being a human. But we're trying to get out of the red. So we want to make sure that we have it managed and we have strategies for keeping us at a baseline instead of at red line. The other place you can find me is on Instagram or Facebook. Again, at Slow Living Solutions is the best way. Or if you want to find me at my Instagram handle is the Tiny Fancy Lady. That's my personal account. People are welcome to reach out and follow along on my slow living solution journey from there. And yeah, I will make sure that you have my email so that you can also add that to the show notes, but people can also reach out to me directly. There are a few different programs that you can do. The low ticket item that is super simple is for people to join the 8-week mindfulness based resilience challenge. It is confidential. It is online. It is a course that gives you access to me and walks you through 8 weeks worth of challenges. You get 2 per week of things to work on to start to move from noticing what it is that you're physically experiencing, to naming it, to building the skills of developing agency and efficacy to build your community and reach out to people and get to sort of that next level of understanding about yourself and management of your stress.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing it. And I just want to ask one last thing before we
Absolutely.
go. But if there's like one nugget of information that you want people to take away, that's the most important nugget that you could offer someone today, what would that be?
You only get to live this one precious life once, so make the most of it.
I love it.
There's no reason to move through it by default when you can move through it by choice.
I love it. It's one of
Couldn't
my
agree
favorites.
more. Couldn't agree more. Well, Scotti, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your insight and know that our listeners are certainly going to really enjoy this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I look forward to hearing how it goes with your audience.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.